1 minute ago, the walls of Buckingham Palace trembled, not from scandalous whispers, but from the tearful, uncontrollable voice of Princess Beatrice. In an unprecedented move, she broke royal protocol to speak her truth. And the truth is devastating. For the first time, Beatrice has revealed what her father, Prince Andrew, truly did and why silence was never an option again. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. It was never supposed to be public. The audience was meant to be private, just a few senior royals, a security detail, and a tight-lipped assistant whose presence went unnoticed. But what unfolded behind those heavy doors shattered the illusion of unity that the monarchy had so carefully projected. Princess Beatrice, always the dutiful daughter, always the quiet one, broke down in front of them all. She wept not with the polite restraint expected of royalty, but with the guttural force of a woman who had reached her breaking point. Her voice cracked, but her words were undeniable. "He made me lie for him, and now I won't anymore." In that one sentence, years of tightly managed silence collapsed. The confrontation wasn't planned. Sources suggest Beatrice had originally requested a closed conversation with King Charles, hoping to navigate a growing internal storm with some semblance of order. But by the time she stepped into that gilded room, the weight of years of guilt, manipulation, and emotional coercion had grown too heavy. Her confession poured out uncontrollably, implicating not only her father, but the entire machinery of royal damage control. The cameras weren't supposed to be there, but someone, perhaps expecting volatility, had discreetly recorded part of the interaction. And when that footage was leaked, just a few muffled minutes of trembling voice and audible sobs, it sent shockwaves across the monarchy. Royal aides were blindsided, not just by the words, but by the source. Beatrice had never strayed from the script. While her sister Eugenie often walked a freer path, Beatrice had always remained loyal, always present for ceremonial duties, always willing to issue statements of vague support whenever the family required. But now, her loyalty had fractured, and her pain turned into protest. Her voice, once a whisper within palace walls, had become an echo loud enough to reach the public. Within minutes, the carefully rehearsed strategies of control were rendered useless. No press release could undo the impact of a daughter publicly disowning the narrative she had been forced to carry. Behind the scenes, royal power brokers scrambled. Queen Camilla and Prince William reportedly advised King Charles against allowing Beatrice to speak further. They feared a domino effect, a ripple of truths long buried beneath decades of discretion. But it was too late. Beatrice had tasted truth, and there was no return. Her declaration didn't just expose her father, it exposed the monarchy's deep-seated culture of concealment, of sacrificing individuals for the image of strength and control. She wasn't simply revealing a family secret, she was declaring war on a legacy of silence. The moment now marks a dangerous turning point. A royal daughter's raw confession, broadcast in emotional fragments, has redefined how the public sees the firm. No longer just a symbol of tradition and pageantry, it now stands accused of protecting darkness at the expense of its most vulnerable. And yet this is only the beginning. But to truly understand the weight of Beatrice's tears, we need to go back to the moment she was forced into silence by the very man who should have protected her. Before her public breakdown, Princess Beatrice was part of a secret pact, an unspoken agreement forged behind palace doors to protect Prince Andrew at any cost. But what was she promised in return for her silence? And who else in the family helped seal the deal? It didn't happen all at once. The silence began as a subtle nudge, a raised eyebrow during an interview prep, a soft warning whispered behind gloved hands. Then came the family meetings, the crisis talks disguised as Sunday lunches. Beatrice, loyal to her blood, stepped into the storm for her father without ever fully understanding the price. She stood beside him when the headlines were their darkest, not because she condoned what he'd done, but because the monarchy had taught her that loyalty was survival. But what began as protection slowly turned into a performance, and soon she couldn't tell whether she was defending him or defending herself. The real shift came in 2019. A covert gathering took place under the guise of a family strategy session. King Charles, Queen Camilla, and Prince Andrew behind closed doors. Princess Beatrice wasn't just invited, she was instructed to attend. That meeting became the birthplace of what insiders now refer to as the family containment strategy, a playbook to preserve the crown's image, even if it meant twisting the truth. Beatrice, shaken but obedient, left that room with a script in her hands. Palace lawyers had already crafted her statements. All that remained was her signature and her silence. It wasn't just about the headlines. The pressure came from every direction. Senior courtiers made it clear. If Beatrice strayed from the family narrative, her future in the firm would vanish. Royal funding, patronages, even her wedding plans, nothing was off the table. She was warned in words that still haunt her. Do this for your father, or lose your place in the family forever. Every appearance, every smile, every carefully chosen word was laced with invisible chains. The palace didn't need to threaten her loudly. The system itself was the weapon. But Beatrice wasn't blind to the cracks forming beneath her feet. Her sister, Princess Eugenie, sensed the trap early. She pleaded with Beatrice in hushed phone calls and late-night visits to reconsider. Her voice carried a chilling prophecy. One day, they'll let him fall and you with him. But by then, Beatrice had already gone too far. Publicly linked to her father's legal defense, she couldn't unravel the knot without strangling herself in the process. The emotional toll was impossible to conceal. At events, Beatrice appeared polished, poised, but the tension was etched into her posture, the weight in her eyes. Paparazzi captured the surface. They missed the agony beneath it. Behind the royal facade was a daughter isolated by duty, tethered to a man she couldn't save, and a family that wouldn't let her walk away. The silence couldn't last forever, and when it finally shattered, so did the illusion of unity the monarchy had worked so hard to maintain. For years the world speculated. Now, through her tears, Beatrice has said it plainly, you all don't know half of it. So what exactly did Prince Andrew do that pushed his own daughter to the edge of betrayal? The silence she had once defended had become her prison, and now the gates had burst open. Beatrice's words, once stifled behind clenched teeth and rehearsed palace lines, spilled out with unbearable clarity. What she revealed wasn't just personal, it was seismic. Andrew's manipulation, she said, wasn't isolated to public scandals or private misconduct. It had invaded the heart of the family. It had rewritten her reality, coerced her choices, and turned her into a calculated tool in a strategy she never agreed to join. In her trembling voice, she didn't just expose him. She dismantled the mask he had worn for years. She spoke of letters, private, handwritten, desperate. Notes Andrew sent under the guise of paternal concern but filled with subtle pressure, guilt-laced pleas and veiled commands. And then there were the texts, coded messages instructing her on how to speak to the press, what to post, where to appear, and most chillingly, whom to meet. Beatrice alleged that in the height of his legal turmoil, Andrew orchestrated a discreet meeting between her and a high-profile public figure known for influencing media narratives. The goal was simple: sway public opinion by leveraging her image as the dutiful daughter. The cost, however, was her autonomy. It didn't stop there. Beatrice described the moment she was told to pose for a carefully planned photograph, a staged family image meant to portray unity. She was dressed, positioned, and instructed when to smile. What the public didn't know was that that very image was later submitted as part of Andrew's legal team's broader argument for character defense. She hadn't just been photographed, she had been weaponized. But the most harrowing confession came when her voice cracked, and she uttered the words that stopped even the most jaded royal aides cold. I was treated like a pawn, not a daughter. The betrayal wasn't just in what Andrew did, it was in how he used her love for him as a shield. Beatrice hadn't been navigating a family crisis, she had been maneuvered through a royal battlefield without armor, her own father placing her on the front lines. When these revelations surfaced, leaked from a confidential transcript of her confrontation, the palace spiraled into chaos. Within hours, royal communications staff were summoned, statements drafted, and damage control deployed. But nothing could erase what had already been said. The illusion of control shattered. The family scrambled to decide whether to stand with the crown or with the daughter who had finally dared to speak. As Beatrice's confessions ripple through royal corridors, the next blow comes from an unexpected place: her own mother, Sarah Ferguson. Sarah Ferguson, once silenced, now seething. Behind closed doors, she had begged Beatrice to stay quiet, but after hearing her daughter's confession, Fergie's fury turned inward, and then outward. What did she know? And why didn't she act? For years, Sarah had stood beside Andrew, her ex-husband turned constant companion, shielding him with practiced grace as scandal and scrutiny closed in from every direction. She had defended him in interviews, downplayed his missteps, and leaned heavily on the narrative that he was misunderstood. But beneath the public support, there was always a quiet calculation, a mother's desperate attempt to hold the family together, to protect the daughters she loved more than anything from being swallowed by a royal storm she couldn't control. That calculation shattered the moment she heard Beatrice's words. It was no longer about the institution or reputation. It was about betrayal, hers and Andrew's. The confrontation erupted behind palace walls, away from the polished smiles and choreographed photos. Fergie didn't come with a script this time. Her voice, usually soft and composed, was now trembling with rage. "You used her. You broke her." Those were the words that rang through the halls, according to one insider. And Andrew, caught in the epicenter of a crisis he had once thought manageable, had no defense. Fergie's anger wasn't theatrical. It was raw, maternal, and decades in the making. Her guilt collided with her fury, and the result was explosive. Rumors began circulating immediately after. A staff member who witnessed the argument hinted at something more: a device on the table, possibly recording the entire exchange. If that audio exists, it could demolish what little is left of Andrew's standing. But for Sarah, the damage had already been done. She had failed to protect Beatrice from becoming a shield for Andrew's redemption arc, and now the realization consumed her. "I failed my daughter, and I won't do it again," she was heard saying through tears later that evening. That promise wasn't just emotional, it was strategic. Fergie sought an urgent meeting with Queen Camilla, and the atmosphere was far from cordial. Sources say the room crackled with tension. Accusations were exchanged. Camilla reportedly questioned Sarah's judgment in allowing Beatrice to spiral so publicly. Sarah, in turn, questioned the firm's moral compass. The discussion ended not in resolution but in silence, a silence louder than any royal decree. But something had shifted. Sarah Ferguson was no longer shielding Andrew. She had crossed an invisible line, and in doing so, she forced the monarchy to confront what it had tried for so long to suppress. One mother's rage had ripped a hole in the carefully controlled narrative, and she wasn't finished. As Fergie finally turns on Andrew, another royal prepares to take a stand, one who rarely speaks, but whose silence now carries thunderous weight. Princess Anne has always been the unshakable core of the monarchy. But in a chilling move, she entered the crisis not to mediate, but to issue a quiet ultimatum. For Beatrice, for the crown, and against her own brother, Prince Andrew. There was no grand announcement, no press release, no staged photo. Only a sudden, silent directive that summoned the senior royals into a private emergency summit. No staff, no aides, no distractions. It was Anne who initiated it, breaking decades of royal habit by demanding direct confrontation. She had watched long enough from the periphery, the steadfast daughter who had given her life to service without spectacle. But this was different. This wasn't about duty anymore. This was about survival of the monarchy, of its soul, and of one woman who dared to speak against its darker instincts. And Anne, ever the realist, knew exactly what was at stake. When she turned to Andrew, her words were few but final. "You've done enough. Step back permanently." There was no shouting, no theatrics, just a tone sharp enough to cut through decades of silence. Anne didn't speak as a sister. She spoke as the enforcer of an institution that could no longer afford his shadow. Andrew tried to interject, to justify, to twist the story into something palatable, but Anne shut it down. She had seen the pattern before. She would not watch it unfold again. And this time, she wasn't alone. Behind the scenes, strategic alliances had already begun to form. William and Catherine, aware of the growing public pressure and the internal fracture, had quietly aligned themselves with Anne, not just in support of Beatrice but in recognition of what this crisis truly represented, a test of whether the monarchy could evolve or collapse under the weight of its own refusal to change. Together, they agreed that silence could no longer be mistaken for stability. Beatrice had cracked the illusion. Anne was prepared to shatter it. The meeting grew tense when King Charles hesitated. His crown had not yet forged his backbone, and his reluctance to permanently sever Andrew's royal connections created a visible rift. Anne, famously loyal but never submissive, looked her brother in the eye and made it clear indecision was complicity. She would no longer play the part of a silent bystander. She had buried her mother, outlived her father's reign, and watched the firm weather scandal after scandal. This, she said, was where the line would be drawn. Later that evening, in a quiet but deliberate act, Princess Anne ordered Andrew's portrait removed from her private residence's gallery wall. The gesture wasn't public, but word of it travelled fast. In a family where symbolism carries more weight than speech, it was louder than any condemnation. It was a message to Beatrice, to the public, and to the palace that the tide had turned. But while Anne brought backbone, it was Prince William who brought fire, and his message to Andrew would ignite the entire country. Enough was enough. Prince William, heir to the throne and future of the monarchy, finally broke his silence not with words but with force. What he did to Andrew's ceremonial role left the entire House of Windsor in stunned silence. There had been whispers for days, meetings behind velvet-draped doors, terse phone calls, aides shuttling between residences with sealed folders. But William had grown tired of whispers. While others hesitated, he moved. With a single order, issued not as a son or brother but as the sovereign-in-waiting, he removed Prince Andrew from the official guest list of the upcoming state ceremony, a move unheard of in recent royal history. The exclusion was total. No uniform, no balcony, no mention. Andrew was, for all intents and purposes, erased. And that was only the beginning. The decision detonated a fault line inside the palace. When William informed King Charles, the exchange quickly devolved into confrontation. Witnesses described voices rising behind thick doors, the rare sound of the future king and the current monarch clashing with unfiltered rage. Charles urged caution, fearful of igniting another public scandal. William, however, saw inaction as betrayal. "This isn't about Andrew," he reportedly shouted. "It's about whether this family still stands for anything at all." For William, this wasn't personal, it was institutional, and he would not allow the future of the crown to be dragged further into disgrace by indecision. That same week, without ceremony or comment, William made a second move, one more symbolic than the first, but no less seismic. At an official engagement, he wore a brooch once gifted to Princess Beatrice by Queen Elizabeth. The second, a subtle but unmistakable gesture of alignment. Royal watchers and insiders caught it instantly. This wasn't just a message to the public. It was a warning to the palace. William stood with Beatrice and against Andrew, and he would no longer play the game of polished neutrality. Behind the scenes, the consequences of William's stance were swift. Rumours swirled that he had personally requested Andrew's removal from all royal residences, citing unresolvable reputational risk. Staff loyal to Andrew began to disappear one by one, reassigned or quietly dismissed. His influence, once protected by royal proximity, began to disintegrate in real time. The inner circle that had shielded him for decades was suddenly porous, leaking stories, abandoning allegiances, watching as their patron was stripped of power with surgical precision. And through it all, Catherine remained close. Though she said little publicly, her presence at William's side was intentional and steady. At key events, she stood a pace closer than usual. Her eyes met Beatrice's during moments where cameras lingered. Her silence, like Anne's, thundered with meaning. Together, they formed a united front against the tide of rot that had begun to rise from beneath the royal floorboards. But as the men of the monarchy warred over justice, Beatrice faced one last test, the weaponization of her own past. Hidden beneath lock and key for years, Princess Beatrice's private diary was never meant to be read. But in the aftermath of her breakdown, its pages were revealed, and what they contained exposed the monarchy's darkest manipulations. The diary emerged not through intention, but necessity. In the emotional wreckage that followed Beatrice's public confession, trusted aides discovered it among her belongings, pages worn thin, ink smudged by time and tears. At first, the palace attempted to contain it, but word leaked quickly, and within days, select entries were shared with a royal journalist known for refusing to bow to the palace's invisible leash. What followed wasn't a scandal, it was an unraveling. The careful, curated image of a unified royal machine dissolved beneath the weight of Beatrice's handwritten agony. Her words were not political, they were human. They detailed the silent torture of being gaslit by the very people who were meant to protect her. Entry after entry exposed Andrew's emotional manipulation, cryptic messages, psychological traps, and a constant weaponization of guilt. "He said the family needed me," she wrote in one passage, but I think what he really meant was that he did. Even more disturbing was the web of palace handlers who, under the guise of tradition, reinforced Andrew's influence. Beatrice wasn't simply persuaded, she was programmed, molded into a compliant figurehead, praised when silent, punished when defiant. One passage struck a chord across the nation. "I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the royal they wanted me to be." It was a line that shattered the illusion of privilege. Her suffering had been invisible behind tiaras and ceremonies, cloaked in duty. But behind that surface was a young woman robbed of her voice, forced to perform loyalty while privately enduring betrayal. The emotional devastation was clear: doubt, disassociation, fear, and the aching loneliness of knowing that her pain was never a priority. More than just emotional wounds, the diary documented staged events, public smiles arranged by crisis managers, interviews rehearsed under threat of consequence, even meetings with foreign dignitaries orchestrated solely to deflay. CT headlines. She had become a diversion, a decoy, a pawn deployed whenever the monarchy needed to buy time or distance itself from Andrew's shadow. The manipulation wasn't passive, it was deliberate, strategic, and deeply cruel. When the excerpts were published, the reaction was immediate and volcanic. Outrage erupted across press, public, and political circles. But the most unexpected response came from within the palace walls. Queen Camilla, long seen as one of the firm's most unshakable players, was said to be visibly shaken after reading the entries. In a rare moment of vulnerability, she reportedly turned to a senior aide and whispered, "This should never have happened to her." Whether her remorse was personal or institutional remained unclear, but for once, the mask cracked. Now, with her truth exposed and the nation reeling, Beatrice faces her final act, not as a royal pawn, but as a royal reckoner. She was once the quiet royal. Today, she stands as the voice of truth. Princess Beatrice has emerged not as a broken daughter, but as a powerful force rewriting her family's legacy. What she demands now will shake the throne itself. In a move that sent tremors through every corner of the monarchy, Beatrice submitted a formal request to be removed from all official royal duties. No warnings, no consultations, just a simple, unambiguous letter addressed to the palace. She was stepping away. She would no longer represent an institution that had once demanded her silence in exchange for acceptance. More than that, she rejected it all. The titles, the funding, the ceremonial honors. With this act, she severed the final threads binding her to the very legacy that had tried to drown her. This wasn't rebellion, it was reclamation. But Beatrice didn't just walk away, she built something from the ashes. Within weeks of her departure, she launched the Truth Trust, a non-profit initiative dedicated to amplifying voices that had been suppressed by the powerful, manipulated by institutions, or buried beneath public relations machinery. Survivors, whistleblowers, daughters like her. The Trust's mission was unapologetically clear: to confront control with truth, to dismantle the myth of royal perfection, and to create a platform for those who had paid the price of silence. It was more than a statement. It was a revolution wrapped in dignity. Her final public address, broadcast live but spoken without a teleprompter or palace handler in sight, cut deeper than any press release ever could. With tears balanced by resolve, she said, "No daughter should carry her father's sins." The words landed like a sword driven into stone, unmovable, undeniable. For the first time, a royal had not only acknowledged the family's failures, but refused to be defined by them. And in doing so, she forced the public and the palace to confront a truth they had long avoided, that loyalty without conscience is not service but servitude. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. From across the globe, support poured in. Messages from women, from survivors, from those who had lived in the shadows of powerful families, each one declaring that Beatrice had become more than a royal. She had become a mirror, a reckoning, and perhaps most ironically, a symbol of integrity within a dynasty built on secrecy. Social platforms lit up with a new phrase, #BeatriceStands. In a world where so many remain voiceless, hers had become impossible to ignore. ND then, quietly, away from the cameras and accolades, she made one final journey. Alone, with no press, no entourage, Beatrice visited her late grandmother's grave. The woman who had once been the monarch now bore witness in silence to the granddaughter who had chosen truth over title. It was not a moment for spectacle, it was a moment for closure, for generations of silence rewritten in one daughter's voice. While Beatrice steps into her own light, a deeper question remains unanswered. What will happen to Prince Andrew now? His titles are meaningless, his name forever tarnished. In the final reckoning, Prince Andrew's downfall is not just a personal disgrace, it's a seismic shift in the monarchy's moral compass. But has he truly faced justice? In the aftermath of Beatrice's stunning revelations and the avalanche of public backlash, the palace had no choice. King Charles, once cautious and restrained in his handling of the matter, made the decision that had been postponed for far too long. Every remaining patronage, ceremonial role, and public-facing honor tied to Andrew was officially revoked. The announcement was terse, sterile in its wording, but deafening in its implications. What once would have sparked a constitutional debate now passed with barely a murmur. The silence wasn't acceptance, it was exhaustion. The nation had already made up its mind. Andrew was quietly relocated to a remote estate, far from London, far from Windsor, and most critically, far from relevance. There was no formal exile decree, just a logistical disappearance. No balcony appearances, no Christmas walks, no public nods to his existence. He became a royal in name only, stripped of all the machinery that once insulated him. Within palace walls, even his most steadfast allies began to disappear. Meetings no longer included him. Invitations stopped. His world, once gilded in entitlement, collapsed into the echo of rooms that no longer recognized his presence. Outside those walls, public sentiment hardened into something close to contempt. Polls revealed the unthinkable. Over 90% of respondents stated unequivocally that Prince Andrew should never return to public royal life in any form. For an institution built on generational loyalty, the numbers were not just shocking, they were fatal. Editorials called for his total removal from succession. Activists reignited calls for a broader audit into royal finances. And at the center of it all, rumors began swirling that the civil case settlements, long buried under NDAs and legal fog, were being quietly reviewed. Financial deals, once protected by opaque royal privilege, were now under increasing pressure to be re-examined in the harsh light of public scrutiny. Yet inside the family, the reckoning remained incomplete. The split endured. Some senior royals refused to speak Andrew's name. Others, bound by old loyalties or private fears, clung to the notion of reconciliation. The Queen's absence had created a vacuum no one could fill. Her firm, once an unshakable unit, now stood fragmented and exposed, divided between those who believed in redemption and those who demanded accountability. And yet none of them, not Charles, not Anne, not William, could deny the truth. It was Beatrice who had broken the silence, and it was Beatrice who had reshaped the legacy. In the end, the most haunting image was also the quietest. A father, alone in exile, cut off not just from his kingdom, but from the daughter he once controlled. No headlines marked his retreat. No ceremonies softened his fall, just the growing silence of a man who underestimated the strength of the one voice he could never fully command. And so, the House of Windsor faces a new era, one forever marked by the voice of a daughter who dared to tell the truth. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.